Work-life balance. This is a phrase that every person who's working today has heard, and it's become a real big topic of conversation, something we think about, talk about a lot. You hear people when they're complaining about how busy they are. Oh, I just need to improve my work-life balance. I got to get better at this. And just to be clear up front, I am not totally against work-life balance. What I'm going to be talking about today is revisiting our approach to work and the way that we look at work-life balance. In today's episode, I'm going to go into some history of work, some Catholic teaching about work, some mindset and how we approach work, and I'm going to leave you with 5 tips on how you can improve your work-life balance. Some real methods and practical things that I've implemented in my life that have been extremely helpful, especially as a single income provider for my family, as a man who works, I think of it as several jobs, as I have a full-time job as a sales manager, and also podcast and speak and coach clients and we used to run an Airbnb and do all these different things. And so how do you balance all of these different things? First of all, how do you balance that? How do you manage those kinds of things? But then also, how do you still strive to be a very, very present father, a present husband, a good friend, and have some good leisure time that you just need as a human being? So I'm going to get into some practical things at the end for all that. If you haven't joined us on Locals yet, seekingexcellence.locals.com, I highly encourage you to do that, as I'm going to go through a lot of stats and things here today. I'm going to be posting some references and some resources there on Locals. And then that last bit there on the practical side of how to actually implement a lot of these things is going to be free on Locals, but you will have to join us on Locals for the full video, for that portion of the video. So I have the full episode available on Locals, and then I'll also have, so if you want to just listen to it there, you can, so you don't have to take a break or end and jump over to Locals. But if you finish here on YouTube or on podcasts and you want to get the remainder of today's episode, that will be available on Locals. I also have just the last portion there available. And so I encourage you to join us on Locals. You can become a supporter as well if you'd like, for as little as $10 per month or $100 per year. Shout out to our supporters. You guys make all of this possible and help me on a Friday morning at 7 a.m. to get out of bed, get down to the office/studio here about 10 minutes away from our home, and write out all these things and do all this research to create a good, hopefully big value adding episode. So thank you to our supporters and all who make that possible. Again, today we're talking about work-life balance. I'm excited to get into this with you today. I think it's going to be really helpful, especially for those of you who are striving to be providers for your family, for those of you who may be working mothers, all of these kinds of different roles that you are an active parent. And even for those of you who are stay-at-home mothers, this may be helpful for you just to understand and be able to work with your husband to develop a better work-life balance in your approach to work as a family. Now let's get into today's episode. All right, again, welcome to the Seeking Excellence podcast. This is your boy, Nathan Crankfield, and it is just a blessing to be with you today. Thank you for listening. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. I want to start today with a story about my wife and I, and the way that my wife has started to explain work to my 2-year-old son, Jordan. And so Emily, one day we were talking about going to work, and my son has become recently really interested or obsessed with the concept of daddy going to work. How was work, Daddy? Every time I come up from the basement, it could be a Sunday afternoon, and I could go down there just to get something from the basement. If I come up, he says, "How was work, Daddy? How was work today?" He loves asking me that, and he's heard my wife say, "How was work?" countless times, and so that's where he's getting it from, and he just says it all the time. If I come up for lunch or just to refill my coffee cup at 10 a.m. and I'm working from home, he's, "How's work? How's work, Daddy?" It's really cute, and I love it. And I'll ask him, "How was your work today?" And he goes, "Good. It was good." And it's really been a fun thing. But he started to say, "Oh, Daddy's got to work today." And he's starting to understand the difference between the week and the weekend. And so we can say, "No, it's Saturday or it's Sunday. We go to Mass on Sunday and Daddy gets to play with you all day." And he started to ask more questions about it. And so he would say, "Oh, Daddy's going to work today." And he's like, "Mama, you going to work too?" And she started to tell him, "Jordan, you are my work. I stay home with you. You are my work." And there's a beautiful aspect to that, right? It's a really powerful statement. I remember the first time she said it, I was like, wow, I really, really like that phrase. And she said, "You are my work." And there's a lot that's hidden within that, and I think is really powerful for us to think about. One, pointing back to my episode from last week, if you didn't listen to it on stay-at-home moms, it really affirms the work of stay-at-home mothers, stay-at-home wives, who are raising children and making a house a home. There's a lot of hard work that goes into that, and we value that as a family, obviously, but we don't always value that as a society. You see a lot of people saying, "Oh, I'm just a stay-at-home mom. I just stay home with the kids." And it's so natural and easy to say that. Even when somebody asks me, "Oh, does your wife work?" I say, "No, she just stays home with the kids." And that word "just" in there, no pun intended, is very unjust. It's very unfair to say to stay-at-home mothers, "No, you just do this. The work that you do is just doing this." Uh, C.S. Lewis says that being a mother is the most important work in the world. And he has this beautiful quote that I posted on LinkedIn. I posted a lot of this stuff on LinkedIn last week if you're not following me there. Or on Locals again. I do post it on Locals every day too. You'll see all these reflections that I'm posting. And these really took off and got a lot of traction, which is what made me want to do this episode. But C.S. Lewis with this beautiful quote saying that motherhood is the job for which all other jobs exist. It is the reason why we have the railroad. It is the reason why we have people working on streets. It is the reason why we have men in skyscrapers doing business. It's so that we can facilitate the production, not the production, the procreation of children and the raising of children to be good, virtuous, productive adults. Right? That is the main purpose of. I mean, it's one of the main purposes of marriage is the procreation of children. It is the main purpose of marriage is procreation of children and the sanctification of the spouses. But to just think about how important, how central motherhood is to society, to the world, you really can't overstate it. And so it's the most important work that we have. Now, the work that I do as a husband and father, providing for that, is obviously also really important too. Not even getting into what my job is, but just thinking about the fact that I facilitate that, right? That if I were to die, for example, Emily would have to go back to work. She wouldn't be able to be a full-time mother anymore. She wouldn't be able to have the finances or the money to take the kids to go do things, to go to the zoo, to do educational experiences and things like that with them, to be able to travel and see different parts of the world. A lot of the things that we have, even just to put food on the table and clothes on their back, right? She would have to go back to work and would struggle, especially to facilitate the same lifestyle that we have now, the same standard of living that we currently enjoy. That would be really difficult for Emily to replicate, to reproduce by herself. This is why we have marriage. This is why we both have our roles, where Jordan can start to understand in his young mind, daddy goes to work so that mommy can do the most important work, which is raising me and my siblings, is being here present in the home, teaching us about the love of God, the love of the Father, and the story of the gospel and where we fit in to all of that, and helping us to feel loved and secure and safe. That is what Emily gets to do because I go off to work every day and provide for my family. Now, there's different family situations and setups where people do that, and parenting is obviously the most important work overall, which is work that both of us do. And so we can start to see that Jordan is also my work. And so work for me doesn't end at 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, similar to how Emily's work is all the time. So is the work of a father. This is one of the things that I think is fairly toxic in our world, especially as we move back to some of these traditional roles and we see more and more women staying home with their children. I think it's really foolish to say, oh, only moms never get a day off. Only moms don't have sick days. It's like, well, the dad, when he's off, is also doing what is viewed as the mom's full-time role. The participation in rearing and raising the children is what dad does in his off hours. So how does it viewed that dad's work ends 9 to 5? And then it's like, previously in previous generations, yes, you did have dads who came home and were not changing diapers, were not helping with dinner, were not cleaning the house at all, and were not really spending time with the children. They were checking out on the television, or they were going to their boys' clubs, or going down to the pub. But if you're not doing that as an active, virtuous, engaged, modern Christian male provider, as a husband and father, then you also don't have this kind of like demarcation, this end point, this finish line at 5 p.m. when you go home and now you're just checked out for the rest of the day. And so you also can view your children, your marriage, as your work. These are your two vocations, right? Your vocation to marriage and fatherhood, and your vocation, little v vocation, to your job, whatever your actual job is. And so all of that in mind, you can start to see the work is not a bad thing. And it really holds me accountable when we tell Jordan, your mommy's work, because that forces me then to not have a negative outlook on my job, to not dread Mondays and complain and come home and say, oh, my work is terrible, to condition my son, even on difficult days, to think that, oh, work is so bad. Even bad days at work can be sanctifying. Even bad days at work can be stretching, can help me to grow as a human being, as a man, as a leader, as a father and a husband. And so it can help me to become a better Catholic, a better Christian, a better follower of Christ by embracing the cross and suffering that comes from my job, whether that be through a difficult or toxic boss, which I'm really glad I don't have now. I have had in the past, not at Hallow, but in other jobs that I've had. But now I'm very blessed, and I get to work obviously in a very purpose-driven organization as we help people to pray, millions of people to pray around the world. But that wasn't always the case. And I've had jobs that I didn't love or that I felt were toxic, especially when I was in the Army. There was times where I had leaders, man, that were just horrible and really difficult to work for. And I dreaded going to work. But it helps me now as I mature to see that even those difficult times can be refining. Even those difficult times taught me something about work, taught me something about who I am and who I'm meant to be and who I'm called to be. And so it forces us, as we say that Jordan is mama's work, to not have this toxic negative view of work, to not have this toxic negative view of the job, of the work week. And I think that's a huge difference. And I'm going to get into some things, especially written from St. John Paul II, that reiterate this, that work is not supposed to be something that's negative. And so that's the first kind of thing I want to reframe as we talk about work-life balance is, again, if you're a husband, father, you're a provider, or you're a working mom, you come home from work and your work continues, right? You come home from quote unquote work, your job, your little V vocation, and now you're entering into your big V vocation. And so the work continues because it is still work sometimes to make dinner, to clean the house, to change diapers, to put the toys away, and to discipline your children. That feels much like work. Sometimes even playing with your children can feel like work. There's times where even on Saturdays where I'm so tired from the week and Jordan wants me to run around with him and chase him and go play golf and go to the park and go on a walk and to play floor hockey and play basketball. And I'm like, yeah, sitting down and reading a book to him feels pretty easy. But doing these things and being active, especially when I know I could just go upstairs and turn on If You Give a Mouse a Cookie, or Guess How Much I Love You, or a YouTube video of construction trucks working and just kind of check out, scroll on my phone while he watches TV. Yes, it does feel like work to avoid that, to do what's best for him and to be an engaged father, to do these things that I know that he needs from me. That is difficult. It is really challenging to do the right thing sometimes when it comes to being a parent. And so I think that that's really, really important, is that we recognize that we embrace that. So not only is work not a bad thing, it's also not a separate thing. Work is a part of your life. You need to start viewing your life as this holistic thing instead of segmenting your life into, there's parts of my life that are enjoyable and parts that are not. There's parts of my life that are work and parts of my life that are life. This is what I don't like about the phrase work-life balance. It's because work is just part of your life. It's all your life. Yes, you need to have boundaries around certain aspects of your life to allow you to be present and in the moment and mindful when you're with certain people or you're at certain events, or even when you're at work. You should have balances and boundaries there, and strong borders between not texting your spouse all day long, not FaceTiming your kids all throughout the workday. There's times to focus and be present in whatever it is that you're doing, but all of it is your life. So there's no such thing as work-life balance. There's healthy boundaries, I think, to setting up your life so that you're not bleeding constantly into these different areas. Yes, it's helpful to compartmentalize, but I don't like the difference between work and life. Maybe work and leisure, work and free time, work and family time balance, that makes sense. But work-life balance, work is a part of your life. So how do you balance something that is the higher category, which is all of your life, and one of the subcategories of your life? You can't balance those two things. You can balance the subcategories, but you can't balance the overarching thing. Does that make sense? I hope so. Getting into this, a little bit of the writing on St. John Paul II, he wrote on human work in Laborem Exercens. I believe it was a papal encyclical on the dignity and the value of work. So I'm going to read a couple of quotes here. First, he says, work is, and has been said, an obligation. JP2 writes, work is, as has been said, an obligation. That is to say, a duty on the part of man. Man must work both because the Creator has commanded it and because of his own humanity, which requires work in order to be maintained and developed. Man must work out of regard for others, especially his own family, but also for the society he belongs to, the country of which he is a child, and the whole human family of which he is a member, since he is the heir to the work of generations and at the same time a sharer in the building the future of those who will come after him in the succession of history. And so again, I really love this because it puts work in this greater context to say that we're not just contributing to something that is only for us, only self-focused and self-driven. We're the beneficiaries, as you can see when you just look out into the world. You can see all of the hard work that has been put into the many things that we get to take part in. Just going to get a cup of coffee somewhere. Imagine just going to a Cracker Barrel, any general restaurant that you go to. There's food and things and items in that restaurant that come from all over the world. This is really beautifully displayed in Economics in One Lesson, I believe is the book. He talks about, or no, it's a separate book actually, that I can't remember. It's actually an essay on a pencil, and I can't remember what it's titled, but I remember learning about this in leadership program of the Rockies and talking about capitalism. And it's like this pencil, just a simple number 2 pencil. It's like the paint for it, the little rubber piece, the lead that's on the inside, like things that come from all over the world, the machines and tools that go into making and manufacturing this pencil, the trucks that drove the pencil from the factory to the store, the people that work at the store that built the store from which you bought it, and then the delivery truck that maybe sent it to your house from Amazon, right? Like thousands, if not millions of people have gone into a pencil going from raw materials being constructed and being delivered to your house. I mean, every nut and bolt on the delivery truck is actually insane. The little scanner and device that the delivery drivers use now to take a picture of the fact that they delivered it to your house and keeping track of what address each package is supposed to go to, it's a huge deal. It's a huge undertaking. There's many people that go into all these different things, and we get to be the beneficiaries of work of other people, and other people are going to benefit from the work that you do. And it reminds me of that great story. It's kind of cliche. People have heard it many, many times. But the story of the men building a church. And so these guys come across 3 different men. They're moving rocks and moving stones to build something. And they come across the first guy, and he's like, "I'm just moving rocks. What does it look like I'm doing?" And then they go to the second guy, and he says something more elevated, like, "Oh, I'm building something. Like I'm working towards constructing this building." And then the third guy they come across says, "Oh, I'm building a cathedral where people are going to pray and encounter the ever-living God." And it's this beautiful story of they're all 3 doing the same work. One just views it as moving rocks and pointless and kind of really with no purpose. The next one sees that there's some purpose or some goal in mind, but it's not really, something that is outside of himself or bigger than himself or really important or going to have lasting impact. The third guy realizes the work that he's doing has eternal importance. And that is huge. It's a huge difference. And that is what we're all called to do and see as well, is that not only does it sanctify us, but in some ways it facilitates the goodness and it benefits so many other people, no matter what your job is. You can find purpose in all of your work when you view it this way. And so that's one of my beliefs, is that what if it's not less work that we need, but it's actually just more purpose? And what if we actually strive to draw purpose, not just from what we did from 9 to 5, but also from our family life and from our faith? This is something I bring up a lot of times when I see men who want to leave lucrative jobs in order to go into ministry. Yes, I believe some men are called to do that. I don't deny that. I don't doubt that. But I think we have overexerted ourselves and over-prioritized as a generation of millennials, and I think we're seeing it in Gen Z as well, that the only good work, the only fulfilling work, the only holy work is to work in the church in some capacity. When that's not true. You can work in many different fields, in many different industries, in many different roles, and still have purpose and still be doing something that is very sanctifying and contributing to the common good. So maybe we just need more purpose, and we shouldn't just be taking our purpose from 9 to 5. For thousands of years, we saw many, many saintly, holy men and women who churned butter and worked on a farm and lived their life, right? They were not necessarily working in youth ministry. It didn't even exist. Why? Because we didn't need it, because most people were just holding and raising their kids in the faith, and you had faith-filled societies and cultures. And so we were raising saints that were going off to become these incredible religious sisters, incredible priests, incredible holy lay people. And their mothers and fathers were just typical workers. They didn't strive to work in ministry. The people who worked in ministry typically were the religious brothers and sisters, monks, and priests. Those are the people who worked in ministry, fully dedicated their life to God. Now we have this kind of weird hybrid where you are a lay person, you're married with kids, but then you're trying to provide for your family by working in ministry. It's never been done before. It's been done for like the last 20 to 30 years. So pointing back to my episode last week with Lila Rose, you want to talk about something that's not traditional and hasn't been done. That is certainly it. Trying to provide for your family while basically being like living in the life of a religious sister or monk or brother, but also being married and a layperson in the most difficult economic times of all time, or up there at least, outside of like the Great Depression. But I think of like a 25-year stretch, this is one of the most difficult times to provide for a family as far as cost of living, cost of goods, and all that kind of stuff. So it's a weird combo. But let's start to look at more purpose and looking at our work, no matter what it is, as something that can give us greater purpose for our lives. And so JP2 here again from the same document says, work is a good thing for man, a good thing for his humanity, because through work, man not only transforms nature, adapting it to his own needs, but he also achieves fulfillment as a human being, and indeed, in a sense, becomes more of a human being. Now, JP2, again, is not just talking about work in the church here. He's talking about work in general. Even if you're working in a lumber yard, that you are providing, just the fact that you're providing for your family. Everything I said at the very beginning of this, that motherhood is the most important work. If you're a dad, especially, and your wife is able to stay home and raise the children, and getting to see the bond that Emily has with the children already, getting to see how advanced Jordan is in his speech, in his understanding of things, how much he's already learned, listening to him sing the alphabet and sing songs and lead us in family prayer in the evenings when we're doing our prayer before meals and things like that. It's amazing. And I'm able to be affirmed in the work that I do that facilitates that, because that's what I can think about, and that's what gives me fulfillment. And men for centuries were able to draw on that, and were able to go into coal mines where they were getting black lung and working in the dark in dust for 12 to 16 hours a day. Why? Because they were providing for their family, to work 12-hour days in factories so they could provide for their families. And they found that incredibly fulfilling. And so just working 6 days a week and going to church on Sunday and seeing their children become good, God-fearing people, and their wife raise the children and make their house a home was enough for them. But now we have this ever-increasing demand and capacity and desire for more and more and more. And I think this is also kind of true with fulfillment, is that we don't rely on our faith enough for our identity and our fulfillment, and therefore we're looking for it in all these other places, especially from our 9 to 5. And so, again, work is a part of our life. We don't need to have necessarily work-life balance. It's okay to see it as our life being the overarching thing and work being one of those main areas in our life. And so I want to talk again, I just kind of dabbled in this a little bit, but I want to talk a little bit about the history of work, just to kind of reframe our perspective on this, because this is another thing that really gets me when it comes to work-life balance, is this concept or this approach to it that we have, that is, I should be working from Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, with an hour lunch break, and then after work, all of my time should be my own. This is why I think we see a lot of young people who don't volunteer in the church, who don't do a lot of things that are seen as selfless, why more and more young people are not wanting to have children, because they want their time after work, because work is so draining. Work is such a drag on my life. It's such a chore and a labor that I need to be sure that after work, outside of work hours, I get to do whatever I want. When we were seeing the dinks, the dual income, no kids, bragging about their lives, right? When you see Chelsea Handler bragging about how cool it is and how good it is to be mother or childless as a woman, that's what they're bragging about. Oh, I get to sleep in until 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. or noon and just drink as soon as I wake up and do all these things. It's like, how's that even appealing? You can see that there's not a lot of fulfillment and purpose in that. It's not hard to see that. And that is what's promoted. That's what's promoted, is you get to just do whatever you want all the time. If you avoid marriage, you avoid responsibility, this is what you get to do. This is what deadbeat dads pursue. They avoid the responsibility of raising their children, the responsibility of marriage, of commitment, because they just say, well, I just get to do whatever I want all the time. And you see this even there's been this ongoing. There's even recently been a trend on social media that is guys at like a mall and they're on opposite escalators, and I've seen it with women too. But the guy one is like this dude with like a car seat, and he's holding a box of diapers, and he's going down the escalator, and going up the escalator is this guy with a PS5 and like sports gear or different things like that. And the concept is, yeah, that used to be you. Now you don't get to do anything you want. Now you don't get to have any fun. To me, I think is one of the dumbest things in the world, because having children is the most fulfilling thing I've ever done in my life. Getting to see Jordan, the love that I have for him and for Rosalia is unreal, unmatched, and nothing, even being in the Army, coming back from war, graduating Ranger School, doing, achieving anything that I've achieved, all the money, nothing has come close to the fulfillment that I get from having children and having a wonderful wife. And so we have to be careful with that. This mindset that is really driven from selfishness and laziness. I think a lot of sloth, a lot of busyness outside of work, where we're constantly doing things and filling our time with a lot of screen time and things that make us feel busier than we really are. It's really ruining our perception of work and leading to a lot of this perceived mental health suffering from a lack of quote unquote work-life balance. And so just to kind of, again, going into the view of work here. So we see the Bible talking about work from the very beginning. In the book of Genesis, man was created to work before the fall, and then Adam was tasked with tilling the garden before the fall. It's not a punishment, it's part of our design. We sometimes forget that because we hear that by the sweat of your brow will you bring up fruit from the earth. And we hear that in God's punishment when he's talking to Adam and Eve afterwards. He says that you will experience a lot of pain in childbirth to Eve, and that by the sweat of your brow, now it's going to be a lot harder for you to provide for your family, to produce food that you need, the things that you need from the earth to Adam. But the truth is that work was already there beforehand. That Adam was called to till the garden, to have dominion over it, to work the garden prior to the punishment happening. And so it's not actually seen as a punishment. It's actually part of our inherent design. St. Paul later says, if anybody's not willing to work, let him not eat. Recognizing and tying together this fundamental need for work as a part of justice and our due to society, as St. John Paul II wrote earlier, as we read from him earlier, that these are actually really tied together. And we see this, in welfare programs and a lot of the issues that we have in society today, where you give people things for free, you give them the things that they need for free without them working for it, and you're removing a huge part of their human dignity. And it often leads to alcoholism, drug abuse, amongst other things. Also in Catholic tradition, we have ora et labora, work and prayer. The Benedictine monks viewed manual labor and spiritual growth as inseparable, that these two were closely tied together, that work and prayer were really all that monks were doing. That's like their entire life. And isn't that also true, I think, as we try to be monks in the modern world, as we try to be holy men and women in the modern world, we try to bring the monastery into our homes. Isn't that also true for us? That when I get up to work on Saturday and I'm going out and I'm going to mow the lawn this weekend, I just wrote my whole to-do list for this weekend. I need to make runs to the storage unit. I need to weed the backyard. I need to mow the lawn. I need to swap out winter and summer clothes, right? I'm looking at my to-do list down here on the table. And you can think about all those things. Is that not work? I'm called to pray with my family, to eat with my family, to play with my children, to spend time with my wife, and also to work. Having a home ownership requires a lot of work. Being financially successful, monitoring the budget, all those things requires work. Taking care of a lawn and a garden, and a vegetable garden especially, requires a great deal of work. And this is my domain, is my house. Yes, I only have a quarter acre of land or lot and a 2,000 square foot house, but this is what I'm called to take care of. I'm called to manage and monitor and maintain my home and improve it even over time. And we've lost that. We've lost even that mindset of maintenance as well in our homes. You see this in a lot of impoverished areas, these cities, in inner cities, where there's just all these rundown buildings and things, because we're not geared towards, aimed at maintaining things anymore. A lot of times we just have this throwaway culture where instead of taking care of something or fixing something ourselves or even paying somebody else to do it, we just throw it away. We just say, oh, I'll just buy a new one. I'll just let this thing be broken forever and not actually fix it or maintain it. That's not virtue, right? That's not what we're called to do. Seeking excellence, the core thing of this entire podcast is being a good steward of the things, of the gifts, the talents that God has given you, the resources that God has given you. That includes the physical things that you own. Yes, there's times to throw things away, but generally we are way too quick to get rid of things. Working through out of the kind of scriptural reference, the church context and history there, we now have the pre-industrial revolution where you had agrarian life that Lila Rose talked about last week. These were long, hard days, as I mentioned. I know she says that husbands and wives were together more than they were apart. I don't think that was true, because when you're working acres, many, many acres, 10, sometimes hundreds of acres, you are out there in the field and you're working long, hard days. You maybe had breakfast together and hopefully he gets back home for dinner time and you have dinner as a family. Obviously, there was a lot more time together as a family. People were not on screens. They were not distracted. You're not running to 60 different sports practices every evening and activities. Families were actually together when they weren't working. That was literally like the two things that there were. Talk about prayer and work. It was prayer, family life, and work. That was it. And a lot of times you took the kids with you to work once they were of age. But these were long, hard days, working sun up to sundown. And families were living nearer on their land. And so you had this concept of balance was not about time, but more about rhythm and working with the seasons and working with the time that you were given. Yes, many were using Sunday as a Sabbath, but most were working long, hard days, sun up to sundown, Monday through Saturday, and using Sunday as their Sabbath time. And so the concept of work-life balance, like, yes, you had slower seasons in the wintertime, especially if you were a farmer, where you had a lot more free time, but then it was grind time. It was grind season during those spring and summer and fall months. And so then moving from industrial to the modern era, the Industrial Revolution, which we mentioned last week, started in the 18th century, mid-18th century, really introduced just another form of hard manual labor. You had men working in factories, women even working in factories, oftentimes 12, 16 hours a day. Labor reform movements in the late 19th and early 20th century started to introduce this 40-hour work week. But this was still mostly revolutionary for factory workers, not for white-collar jobs. Most white-collar jobs, as they still paid more money, were still working long hours and long days. In the post-World War II era, we saw men working 50 to 60 hours a week as they were working to rebuild America after the war. Most of the young men were gone for long stretches of time during World War II from 1941 to 1945. And so when they got back, they had to get back to work, even though they were working hard for those 4 years at war, literally at war and saving the planet. Men of this era came back from war and got to work. They worked long hours and long days, and they were rebuilding our country, and they really benefited from it financially. The concept of work-life balance really started to emerge in the 80s and the 90s. The concept of work-life balance really started to emerge in the 80s and the 90s, and it has since really devolved, in my opinion, into this kind of entitlement and leisure-first mindset approach to living. Now I want to take a look at the arguments for and the arguments against work-life balance. The arguments for it are obviously driven mostly by mental health, but also from some other angles. Mental health is a real thing. Anxiety is a real thing. Burnout can be a real thing. I don't deny that. I'm going to talk a little bit when I get to the anecdotes to some of this stuff, how you can really improve your mental health, and the first thing you need to check when you start to experience some burnout and stress and heavy anxiety from working. But I also just want to acknowledge that can be very real, and it can damage other things too. One of the next argument I would say for it is being present as a father and just having a healthy marriage. When you're gone at work all of the time, it is going to impact and make a dent on your fatherhood. I actually encourage a lot of my friends and just generally to you listeners out there that there are men out there who go too far into their full-time job, that are traveling more than they need to, that have dove into careers that are pulling them away from their family to the extent of really damaging their relationship with their children. That is not something I'm willing to do. There's sacrifices and trade-offs to everything you're going to do in life. And so I do think that there's something to having your wife stay home and making some pretty big sacrifices, even if that means the husband working longer hours to provide that. But I cannot really, for the life of me, understand men who work long hours and make a lot of money and have jobs that demand that they travel and be gone for extended periods of time that also have their wives working. Now your children are also full-time away from their mother, and they're away from their dad much more than they're meant to be. So at least if you're going to have the trade-off there, I think for me, the easy thing is to say, if I have to work 50 hours a week, 10 more hours a week than I normally would, maybe 15 hours a week more than I normally would, 55 hours a week, let's say, so that my wife can then be with my children 40 more hours a week, say 45, because she used to have like a 30-minute commute to and from work. Let's say it's 45 hours a week that she's getting back with the children full time. That's a worthy trade-off, because I'm trading 10 or 15 hours of my time for 45 hours of my wife's time. That's a 300% return, right? On the time that we're getting, 400% return on the time. And so that's a worthy trade-off. To be trading all of my time to work 50 to 60 hours a week and my wife to be working 40 to 50 hours a week, I think is somewhat ludicrous. But again, people make their own value judgments. They make their own priorities and decisions. I just think that, especially from a Catholic perspective, if you're looking at it, children are not meant to be raised by strangers and to be away from their parents the vast majority of the time. I think the only worthy trade-off, if you're going to have that, is even Father Ripperger talks about this. If you listen to some of his content on marriage, he's going to talk about how his dad worked several jobs so that his mom could stay home and raise the children. Literally, like, multiple full-time jobs. I have another friend who I know that's like this. His dad was a police officer and I think ran a store and was like working all the time, like just grinding it out. And there's a lot of great men out there who have done that and who are doing it right now. So shout out to you guys who are doing that. And then the other thing that argues for work-life balance that makes these boundaries really hard is technology. The fact that we take our laptops to and from the office. It used to just be that when you were out of the office, it was easy to at least be checked out from there. But now a lot of times when you're working from home, you have your laptop on your phone here, you have Slack downloaded, you have Gmail, you have all the things that connect you. I got Notion on here, I have HubSpot, I got everything that I need to keep working even when I'm at home. So it's easy to not shut the brain off and have those boundaries because of technology. I've already given a lot of the the arguments against it, but again, work is not the enemy. We don't have to embrace this false dichotomy that you're either working or living your life. You can do both. I think it's really essential to masculine identity to be willing to work hard, to see work as a good thing, and not to be so drained and looking at work as though it's the enemy of your life. I don't think that's good for the masculine spirit. Providing is loving your family. And so seeing your work and tying it into a greater purpose of providing is really helpful and going to eliminate this need for this quote unquote work-life balance, I think. And then lastly, just remember leisure and laziness. There's two different things, right? And seeing that we need to Sabbath on Sunday. A lot of times people aren't Sabbathing right on Sunday, and then they're experiencing work-life balance and burnout, work-life balance problems and burnout because they're not actually entering into the Sabbath. God worked for 6 days and rested on the seventh, and you're not doing that. You're not doing that well, and therefore you're blaming your Tuesday for being the point that's stressing you out and draining you, when really it's your Sunday and it's you not being dedicated to living the way that God prescribes us to live. All right, so that's it for the podcast portion of this. I'm now going to be turning into the solutions. What are the actual anecdotes to this? Again, you can join us at seekingexcellence.locals.com. I'll have the link in the show notes. You can join us there for free. Just trying to increase my members over there as we build the community of those of you who are actively seeking excellence and striving to be your best in this life. And so join us over there on Locals, and you'll be able to get the remainder of this video and my 5 tips, the things that have literally changed my life as I work, again, these 50 to 60 hours a week and avoid burnout. I feel more passionate, more purpose-driven than ever. I'm going to share the practical things that have changed my life in regards to this exact topic. So we hope to see you over there. All right, so let's get into some of these practicals. How do we actually start to develop good mental health, to be strong against the temptations to allow your work, your 9 to 5, to bleed into your family life and to really dominate and take you away from your family? The first thing that you want to do, step number 1, is you need to make a plan. You need to really sit down and analyze how many hours a week do I honestly need to work in order to be successful, in order to hit the goals, to provide for my family, to do the things that I need to do. I knew a man one time who was really dedicated. He was a barber. He was my barber for a short period of time. He talked way too much and it took a really long time to cut my hair, so I had to find a new barber. But he was a good man. He was a Christian, and he was a dedicated provider for his family, which is why I wanted to support him. But man, I can't be driving 20 minutes to a barbershop because he lived closer to my former apartment, and then having you take 90 minutes to cut my hair because you keep stopping to talk every 5 minutes. It was painful. I wanted to support him, but I was like, man, I can't do it anymore. And so he was a good man, though. He was a barber during the day, and he also drove Uber Eats or DoorDash in the evenings to make extra money for his family because his wife stayed home with their 2 kids. And so that's what a lot of men are doing. And so you need to sit down, if that's what you're going to do, and analyze it. For me, I sit down and I say, okay, how many hours a week? This is back, I started this when I was an account executive doing sales. How many hours a week do I need to be doing sales in order to hit my target, hit my quota, so I can make my goal income for the year through my sales role? And so I'd sit down and I'd map that out. Okay, I need this number of hours per week. Then we sit down outside of that. I say, okay, I'm trying to build my local supporters, trying to build my content engine, trying to, in order to do that, I need to be posting on social media consistently, posting on LinkedIn regularly, posting on locals, posting on Instagram, posting on my videos on YouTube, editing, all these different kinds of things. And I say, okay, how long is it going to take me to do that? How many episodes am I going to do a week? And then I say, okay, on top of that, I have coaching clients. How many coaching clients can I handle in a certain workload at a certain period of time? How many hours per week, per month is that going to take me? Then I look and say, okay, for speaking, I'm going to be speaking. What's going to be my max number of speaking engagements I'll do, especially traveling out of town in order to speak and get paid to speak? So I look at all of that and I say, okay, how much time per week is that going to take me? Then I have my, let's say, 50 hours per week. So I look and I say, okay, if my job is going to take me, let's say 35 hours per week, 40 hours per week, then I'm mapping it down. I'm saying, okay, I'm going to work in my full-time job from 8 to 4. Monday and Tuesday, I'm going to work from 4 to 5 on Seeking Excellence things. Wednesday evening, I have a batch evening for Seeking Excellence stuff. So I finish work at 4, and I'm going to work from 4 to 9 p.m., sometimes 10 p.m. on Seeking Excellence stuff. That's my batch, get it done time for that. Then I have Friday afternoons. Usually Friday afternoons, we end work a little bit early. And so if I'm done at 3 o'clock on Friday, then maybe I'm using that time from 3 to 5 to work on Seeking Excellence things as well. Anything that doesn't get done during that time period, I'm going to do on Saturday afternoons, especially when we only had one kid, during nap time. So I'm going to use nap time as an extra 2 to 3 hours to work on Saturday afternoons on Seeking Excellence oriented things. In the midst of all that, especially when we were sleeping well, it was easy to say, okay, on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'm going to get up in the morning and go to the gym before work. So I'm going to the gym at 6 a.m. to get my workouts in, come home, eat breakfast with my family, and begin working at 8 or 8:30. Then you can say on top of that, I'm going to go to daily mass on Wednesdays and Fridays. And so Wednesdays and Fridays, I'm going to go to 6:30 mass or maybe a noon mass. And I'm going to get my daily mass time in during that time. Now, maybe you can't do that. Maybe you can only go to one daily mass per week. Maybe you have to trade that out with one of the gym days. You name it. You figure out how you're going to do it. I started to balance out where I said, okay, I have one-on-ones with my team, the people that I manage. And so I'm going to use my time to my one-on-ones when I can, when we don't have stuff to go over on the computer screen. I'm going to call them. I'm going to have Slack up on my phone where I'm taking notes, and I am going to walk while I'm doing my one-on-ones. And so usually on Tuesdays when I have my one-on-ones, I get like 15,000 steps in. And so that's another way to kind of supplement some of the exercise because I may not be able to go to the gym 5 days a week. And so how can I start to supplement that? Or on days that I don't go to the gym, after dinner, Emily, do you want to go on a walk with me and the kids? And we'll go out on a walk as a family and we'll walk for 1.5 miles. And you find these ways to start to fit things in because maybe I'm not going to be able to be at a 10 in physical excellence. I'm not going to be able to be at a 10 reading, 12 books a month or whatever it is. But having that balance, this excellence mindset where I'm tracking where I am in these major categories of my life. You can use the weekly tracker that I've posted on here on Locals before if you'd like to do that. And then you get a feel for where do you need to put more time and energy, more boundaries up. So you structure your family life to around the amount of work that you need to do, especially if you're the sole provider for your family. You're going to take all of that and you're going to say, okay, Monday nights, I'm going to have dinner with my family and I'm going to play with the kids afterwards. Tuesday nights, same thing. Wednesday night is my work night. I make up for that by Thursday and Friday being very present. And then Saturday, Sunday, I'm all with the kids. I'm all present. I'm all here, right? You're going to be able to be more present. And if I have to travel to speak, then maybe that Wednesday, I don't do the work night. I try to fit it in other times. Or when I'm traveling, I try to use my time where I'm gone, working my butt off. And so I'm working even more when I'm traveling because when I'm on the plane, I can write LinkedIn posts. When I land and it's late at night, I'm watching TV after dinner. I can be editing podcasts. I can record a podcast when I'm on the road. And then I can come back and that Wednesday, I can have that extra time to kind of make up for the time that I missed with my family. The second thing is right along those lines. And so point number 1 is make a plan. Point number 2 is be where you are. This is what we call mindfulness. We used to, if you remember, if you're old enough to remember, we used to actually just go to the bathroom and just go to the bathroom. You didn't scroll on your phone for 15 minutes while you were sitting on the toilet and spend 10 more minutes on the toilet than you actually needed to, right? Sometimes you read. I know a lot of our dad's generations, they had magazines or things like that. But now you can't sit on the bus. You can't sit in line at the bank or at the checkout line and just be there. You have to be on your phone all the time. And this addiction to our screens has really damaged our family time. You want to talk about something that's damaging your relationship with your kids or your relationship with your spouse? This is it. And so when you can start to break that up and actually just be where you are, when you're at work, you're not FaceTiming your children, you're not calling your wife. Obviously emergencies are different, and there's times to FaceTime the toddler, no doubt about it, but constantly texting, constantly checking in, constantly in the group chats with your friends and your family and talking about whatever's happening that day, not the move. When you're at work, be locked in, be focused. And then when you go home, put your phone down. You wouldn't talk about, you can have Slack and stuff on your phone. Put your phone in another room. That's what I like to do. I'll put my phone in the bathroom in our bedroom and not lock it in there, but leave it in there. And then I go out there and I play with my son. I turn notifications off on my Apple Watch. And then I am present and I can play soccer with my son in our living room, and I don't have to worry about constantly being dragged out by different emails. You can also have Slack on your phone, but not have the notifications on. You can have Gmail on your phone and not have notifications on. You can have Instagram, TikTok, whatever it is on your phone and not have notifications on. I don't have any of the applications I just named to you. I don't have notifications for. So I don't get them. You can also put your phone on Do Not Disturb. And so you're not getting pinged by things like that, but you're still able, if people need you and need to call you, you're available. And so having that lack of screen time, having dedicated date nights, having one-on-one time with your kids, one-on-one time is really important to me. That makes all the difference in the world when it comes to not feeling the same burnout and not feeling like work is creeping into your family life. My third recommendation is being willing to push yourself and test your limits. You're capable of more than you give yourself credit for. You're capable of a lot more than you give yourself credit for. And things like I'm talking about, of where I used to do, Mondays and Fridays, I also used to wake up early. And if I wasn't going to daily mass, I would just come into the office and I'd be working from 6 to 9 on personal things. And then I would get to work on my full-time job at 9. I'd finish at 4 o'clock and go to the gym on my way home, and then be super present with my family from 5 to 8 p.m. when it was Jordan's bedtime. And then I'd have Emily time from 8 to 10 p.m. And then we'd go to bed together. And that was a Friday. I woke up at 5:30 to do that, and I was grinding it out. You know what makes it a lot harder to do that? Being out of shape, eating junk food, drinking too much, smoking, whatever it is that's actually harming your sleep and your energy, that's going to destroy you. And that's partially why you're feeling burnout sometimes, is you're filling your body with junk and with crap. And then you're like, why do I feel this way? I feel so burnt out. I feel so tired. It's like, yeah, dude, you're not exercising at all. You're not strength training at all. You're not grinding at all in a way that's you're not fueling yourself so that you can grind in a way that's sustainable. And so, yes, there was times, especially during postpartum, where I say I got to be really committed to taking my creatine in the morning, really committed to taking my electrolytes in the morning so that I'm hydrated throughout the day, drinking healthy amounts of water, not eating fast food, not eating a bunch of sugar each day because it's just going to make me crash, not drinking a ton so that's going to ruin and throw off my sleep. I've had to make sacrifices with those things, even though I love drinking. I love a good cigar. I love eating junk food. Emily and I are we are such sweet tooth people and just love junk food. But yeah, you got to let some of that go if you're going to actually reach your potential, provide for your family, and do your best. So be willing to push yourself, stretch your limits, and make some sacrifices so that you can be fueled to have the energy that you need to do the things that you need to do on a daily basis. The fourth one, this is a big one, and it's especially difficult for people when you're at this kind of teetering point, right? There's a breaking point, if you will, or a point of where you start to leverage this that's going to be really helpful. And this is buying your time back. So there's a certain point where you're starting to make money where it's actually helpful to start paying somebody to clean your house, even if it's just once or twice a month for that deep clean of the house. Starting to pay somebody to help you with some of your side hustles. So like I mentioned recently, I'm bringing on an intern for Seeking Excellence over the summer. I'm paying somebody to do a lot of the tasks that are filling up that Monday and Tuesday afternoons, 4 to 5:30, that I'm working on Seeking Excellence things, of editing podcasts, creating social media reels from podcast episodes, uploading things. I'm hiring somebody to do that. I've gotten to the point where, even though it's basically breaking even, to a certain extent with Seeking Excellence income, I'm like, that's okay for me if it's breaking even, because it's going to allow me to then propel myself forward. And so, yes, it's not like I'm making all this money with Seeking Excellence, which is why I'm always grateful for my local supporters, because you guys do help me to provide to this point where we've gotten to the point now I can actually have people help and break even on that. But then hopefully the goal is that that's going to propel us forward to help me to create better content. I feel really good about today's podcast episode. Why? Because I've had more time to prepare for it. And that's what I want to focus my time and energy on, where I think if I create more value and add more content and more value in each piece of content that I create, then I'm going to have more local supporters. I'm going to be able to have more exclusive things on locals, be able to have more coaching clients, be able to get more speaking engagements. And if I can do that, this freeing me up to be able to produce more and do things that are actually revenue generating is really, really good. And so even if it's paying the kid across the street to mow my lawn so that I can have that personal time with my family, buying your time back is really, really good and really important. This is why you should be striving to make more money, because it actually starts to compound over time, where I'm going to be able to, contract out a lot more over time as I'm making a greater income for my family. The last thing here is making sure your prayer life is strong. This should be obvious, but I truly believe this. Again, this is similar to what I said earlier about the Sabbath. If your prayer life is not good, if you're not praying every day for at least 15 minutes a day, ideally 30, if you do not ever have a holy hour of just an hour of prayer, ideally in adoration, if you are not actually entering into the Sabbath of having a really low phone activity day where you're not scrolling, a day where you're not working, even mowing the lawn, ideally you're not grocery shopping, not doing any of the things that are viewed as tasks or chores or work, and you're just focused on your family and resting. If you don't have that, you're going to feel burnt out. You're going to feel tired. You're going to feel exhausted. You're going to have bad mental health if you're not praying. That's just a fact of life. If you are a Christian, you should know that. You should believe this. You should really allow that to sink in, that if you are feeling burnout and you are not praying, you need to pray. You need to make time for it. Mother Teresa is a great story that I tell in a lot of my talks of Mother Teresa's sisters coming to her and saying, "Mother, we don't have time to do the daily holy hour anymore. There's too many people out there." They're literally caring for the dying and the sick, the poorest of the poor. So think about how important the work was that they were doing. So all of you who think that family demands or your work is so important that you can't make time for prayer, they were doing literally the most important work in the world and were spouses of Jesus Christ himself. And they were saying, we don't have time to pray anymore. Mother Teresa sat there and she got contemplative and she said, yeah, I really hear you. And she listened to them and heard them out. And she said, you guys, sisters, you're right. We cannot do the daily holy hour anymore. It's not going to work. Now we need to have 2 holy hours a day, or else we're never going to get all this work done. She realized the centrality and the importance of prayer. That prayer is fuel. It connects us to God. It resets our mind, our spirit, our body to be in the place, in the zone that you need to be in order to really thrive and in order to really crush it. And so don't look at prayer as transactional. Look at prayer as the need, as the gas, the fuel. Just as food is to your body, so is the Eucharist and prayer to your spirit, to your soul. And so if you're feeling drained, you're feeling burnt out, a lot of times we're blaming our mental health for things that are soul issues. You're living in a state of mortal sin. And so you don't have sanctifying grace. You don't have grace working in your life. You've cut yourself off from the life of God, and you're blaming mental health or work-life balance or burnout or your boss or whatever it is on that. And on you're putting the weight of cutting yourself off from the life of God on your boss, on your job. And that's not fair to your boss or your job. And so get your prayer life right. Go back to confession. Develop a plan for your prayer life. Buy your time back when you're able to. Be willing to push yourself and stretch your limits. Make some sacrifices, especially when it comes to food, diet, rest, and alcohol. Be present when you're working and be present when you're at home. Have clear boundaries and be locked in on whatever it is that you're doing whenever you're doing it. And then the last thing, of course, that we started with was make a plan. Have a plan. Talk with your spouse. Really do a time audit and think about what amount of time you need to dedicate to each thing, and then create a schedule and a family routine. Even better yet, if you're having difficulty with this with your wife, let her create the schedule. This is what I did with Emily. We were going back and forth about when I was working, when I wasn't. I said, you create the schedule. This is the amount of time I need for all these different things. You tell me what would be best. What would make you happiest? When do you want me to be here? When are you okay with me being gone? And how can we set this up so we can have family success as a Crankfield family? Thanks so much for listening today. God bless you. Thank you for being here on Locals. It was a pleasure to be with you, and I'm so grateful for your presence. Even if you're a free member here, really, really appreciate you signing up and joining the Seeking Excellence community here. So let me know in the comments anything that's been helpful for you in your own life, and when it comes to work-life balance, increasing your prayer life, creating a plan, working with your spouse, stretching yourself, or buying your time back. I'd love to hear any success stories you've had with that as well. All right. God bless you. Know of my prayers for you. It's time for you to go out there and be your best. I'll see you next time.